Oi, Dravek, you gonna sleep through the jump or what? The voice belonged to Spacer First Class Tyvon Ress, a wiry belter with a drawl that stretched vowels like cheap elastic. He was leaning against the bulkhead, chewing on a protein stick that smelled vaguely of despair. Petty Officer Third Class Kaylin Dravek cracked the seal on her bunk pod. It wasn't the clean, sterile whiff of a hospital ward or the crisp bite of a planetary breeze. It was a stale, metallic aftertaste that clung to the back of her throat. A shitty reminder that she was far, far away from anything resembling home. She swung her legs out, boots clanging against the deck of the Colossus, and rubbed the sleep from her eyes. The hum was there, as always, a bone-deep vibration that you didn't hear so much as feel, like the ship itself was alive and restless. Its length spanning nearly half a light second, 150,000 kilometers or 94,000 miles in this case, of pure reinforced alloy and ambition of man, and she was just one of the many bacteria crawling through its guts in comparison. "Fuck off, Ress," Kaylin muttered, fishing her jumpsuit from the locker. The fabric was standard issue gray, patched at the knees, from too many hours crawling through maintenance ducts. Not all of us live on stims and bad decisions. Stims keep me sharp. Bad decisions keep me sane. He grinned, teeth stained from years of chewing whatever passed for tobacco out here. Heard we're jumping soon. Big push in Q17. You ready to see some action? Kaylin snorted, zipping up her suit. Action's overrated. Last time we jumped, I spent 6 hours unclogging a coolant line because some idiot forgot to purge the system. Nearly froze my damn fingers off. Yeah, well, this ain't a milk run. Word's going round. Command's throwing everything at this sector. Quintessium's on the line. Tyvon tossed the protein stick wrapper into the recycler, missing by a good meter. It skittered across the deck, and he didn't bother picking it up. Quintessium, the magic juice that made faster-than-light travel possible. Kaylin had seen the briefings, grainy hollow footage of asteroid fields glittering with the stuff, enough to power a fleet for a decade, enough to kill for, apparently. She shrugged, pulling her hair into a tight bun. If it's such a big deal, why is it always us grunts stuck holding the bag when shit goes sideways? Because, darling, Tyvon said, adopting a mock-posh accent, we're the backbone of this fine operation. The unsung heroes of the void. Backbone, my ass! More like the appendix. Nobody notices us till we burst. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. The truth was, she'd signed up for the Colossus expecting something grander than scrubbing plasma conduits. 2 years in, and the most excitement she'd seen was a bar fight on shore leave that ended with her nursing a black eye and a hangover. The intercom crackled, cutting through their banter. All hands, prepare for jump sequence, T-minus 30 minutes, navigation cruise to stations. Kaylin groaned. Great, another day in paradise. Half a galaxy away on Viridia, a super-Earth, Harith Joran adjusted the straps on his daughter's school bag, his calloused fingers fumbling with the buckles. The morning sun was low, casting long shadows over the wheat fields that rolled out like a golden sea beyond their prefab hab. Viridia's gravity was heavier than Earth's, about 1.3 G, enough to make your knees ache if you weren't born to it. But Harith had spent 40 years working this land, and his body had adapted. Mostly. Papa, you're doing it wrong again, Lycia said, her voice a mix of exasperation and affection. At 9 years old, she was all elbows and curiosity, with a mop of dark curls that defied any attempt at taming. Am I now? Harith raised an eyebrow, pretending to struggle harder. Maybe you should carry it yourself then, eh? Save your old man the trouble. No, she giggled, swatting his arm. You're supposed to do it. It's tradition. Tradition, huh? Sounds like an excuse to me. He tightened the last strap and stepped back, hands on his hips. There. Fit for a queen. Or at least a kid who's late for the shuttle. Lycia stuck out her tongue, then darted forward to hug him, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. Thanks, Papa. See you tonight? Count on it. Got a batch of rye to thresh, then I'll be home. Your ma's making that stew you like, the one with the root tubers. Yum! She beamed, then turned and sprinted toward the shuttle pad. At the edge of the Tilvani settlement, her bag bouncing against her back. Harith watched her go, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Viridia wasn't much, just a dirt ball with good soil and better yields, but it was theirs. A quiet life, away from the war that chewed up the stars. Too quiet. Back on the Colossus, Lieutenant Arya Voss stood at her nav station, her console a constellation of blinking lights and scrolling data. She was 28, but the bags under her eyes made her look a decade older. 3 shifts in a row, no sleep, and a steady diet of caffeine tabs had left her wired and fraying at the edges. Her uniform was crisp, though. Regulation demanded it, even if her mind felt like a scrambled hollow feed. "Jump coordinates confirmed," she called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Sector Q17, grid 429, bearing 215 Mark 30. FTL drive at 98% capacity." Captain Zorakthal swiveled in his command chair, his mandibles clicking softly, a habit that meant he was thinking hard. The Zytherian was a veteran of a dozen campaigns, his exoskeleton scarred from battles fought long before humanity joined. The Galactic fray. 98%? He rumbled, his voice like gravel over steel. "Why not 100? "Engineering's still recalibrating the secondary coils, sir," Arya said, not looking up from her screen. "We're within operational limits. Jump's green." "Within limits isn't good enough, Lieutenant. Not with a ship this size." Thal's compound eyes glinted under the harsh lights. "Recheck it." Arya bit back a sigh. "Aye, sir." Her fingers flew over the controls, pulling up the diagnostics again. The FTL drive Alcubierre derived folds space around the Colossus like a bubble. At half a light second long, the energy required was astronomical, and the margin for error was razor thin. "Voss, you good?" The question came from Senior Chief. Petty Officer Lena Keir, a stocky woman with a buzz cut and a perpetual scowl. She was stationed at the auxiliary console monitoring power flow. "Yeah, just double-checking," Arya said, her tone clipped. She didn't need Keir mothering. Her. "Not fucking now." "Triple-checking, you mean? Relax, kid. You've got this." Lena's voice softened, just a fraction. "Not like we're jumping blind." Arya didn't reply. She couldn't shake the itch at the back of her mind, the feeling that something was off. But the numbers lined up. They always did. She exhaled sharply. "Coordinates re-verified, all systems nominal," Thal nodded. "Initiate countdown. T-minus 10 minutes. Engage warp drive on my mark. Comms, signal the..." "Fleet, we're prepping for jumping." Aye. The bay hummed with activity as the crew locked in. Arya's pulse thudded in her ears, louder than the ship's ambient drone. She told herself it was just exhaustion, nothing more. On Viridia, the school shuttle lifted off with a low whine, kicking up dust as it climbed into the pale sky. Lycia pressed her face to the window, watching the fields shrink below her. The trip to the orbital station was a monthly treat. Science class got to tour the AgSats, see how the crops they grew planetside were processed for the war effort. She clutched her notebook, scribbled with doodles of starships and half-formed equations she'd cribbed from her brother's old textbooks. "Gonna be an engineer someday," she muttered to herself, tracing a finger over a sketch. "Fix ships. Fly 'em, maybe." The kid next to her, a gangly boy named Torin, snorted. "Girls don't fly ships, that's dumb." Lycia glared. "Says who?" "My cousin's a pilot. She shot down like 10 drones." "Yeah, right. Bet she's just a cook or something." "Shut up, Torin. You're just mad 'cause you flunked math again." She turned back to the window, ignoring his grumbling. The shuttle banked, giving her a glimpse of Viridia's curve, 5 times Earth's mass, a patchwork of green and gold. Home. She didn't notice the faint ripple in the sky, a distortion that flickered and vanished as quickly as it appeared. "T-minus 1 minute, the intercom blared. Kaylin strapped. Into her station in the lower decks, a maintenance pod near the aft reactors. Her job during jumps was simple: monitor the coolant lines, make sure nothing ruptured when the FTL bubble snapped into place. Tyvan was across from her, fiddling with a handheld scanner. "Ever wonder what it'd be like to miss a jump?" he asked, casual as if he were talking about the weather. Jesus, Ress, don't jinx it. Kaylin tightened her harness. Last thing I need is to end up smeared across a black hole. Nah, we'd just pop out somewhere random, maybe a nice beach planet, drinks with little umbrellas, or right into a Zetherian hive fleet. Pass. She checked her gauges. Pressure. Nominal. Flow steady. The hum spiked, a shiver running up her spine. 30 seconds, the intercom droned. Here we go, Tyvan said, cracking his knuckles. Hold on to your lunch. The FTL drive engaged. Space folded. For a heartbeat, the Colossus ceased to exist in real space. Then it came back, in full. Arya saw it first. The view screen flared, not with the empty black of Sector Q-17, but with a wall of blue and green. A planet. Too close. Too big. Collision alert! Lena shouted, her entire console lighting up with red. We're in Atmo! Evasive! Thal roared, slamming a claw into his armrest. Full reverse thrust! No time. Arya's hands moved on instinct, rerouting power, trying to abort the jump sequence. Too late. The planet, Viridia, she'd realized later, filled the screen, its surface rushing up towards them. The jump spat the ship out, not in the battle zone, but 1.2 astronomical units off course, directly into the planet's upper atmosphere. At 99% light speed, the Dreadnought's 150,000-kilometer bulk tore through the planet's air like a blade through flesh. A blinding flash. The impact through the atmosphere was beyond sound. The Colossus hit Viridia like a sledgehammer to a lollipop. The kinetic energy release was staggering. 1026 joules, equivalent to 1 billion Hiroshima bombs detonating in unison. The warp field's residual energy interacted with Viridia's gravity. Well, ripping an insignificant bow-end section of the Colossus apart mid-descent. Chunks of hull, some kilometers wide, vaporized in fiery streaks, while the core section plowed into the northern continent at a shallow angle, friction igniting a plasma sheath that barely scorched her hull. However, the planet itself wasn't so lucky. The ship punched through the crust, a 150,000-kilometer spear tearing a bleeding gouge across the planet's equator. Mountains vaporized, oceans, flash-boiled. The impact site near the Tilvani settlement erupted in a plume of molten rock and vaporized soil that punched through the stratosphere. Firestorms ignited as oxygen combusted in the superheated air, sweeping across the plains in a roaring wall of flame. The kinetic energy, mass times velocity, squared, was apocalyptic, fracturing tectonic plates and hurling fragmented planetary debris into orbit, painting Viridia's guts. Or what was left of it, 2 light weeks across the galactic sector. Inside, the crew was flung against their restraints. Kaylin's head snapped forward, blood bursting from her nose as her pod shook apart. Tyvan's scanner smashed into the bulkhead, shattering. Arya gripped her console, her scream drowned by the shriek of rending metal. Thal braced, his exoskeleton cracking under the G-forces. Viridia died in seconds. The shuttle with Lycia aboard was still climbing when the shockwave hit, flipping it end over end before it was vaporized and disintegrated. Harith, threshing rye, looked up as the sky turned white, then red, then nothing. Mercifully, 5 billion. Souls, farmers, kids, teachers, gone, was reduced and vaporized back to basic elementary particles within seconds. They didn't feel a thing. The Colossus emerged from the other side of the fragmented planet in seconds, trailing wreckage. Its bow was crumpled, reactors venting plasma, half its length a twisted ruin. The hum was silent, replaced by the wail of alarms and the suffocation of crew survivors that made it through the initial crash. Arya sat in the medbay hours later. A blanket draped over her shoulders, her left hand was bandaged. Shrapnel from a blown panel had sliced through her palm. The pain was distant, dulled by shock and meds. Around her, medics triaged the wounded, their voices clipped and mechanical. Fractured. Ribs Bay 3. Severe burns, stabilize and move. A petty officer sobbed quietly in the corner, cradling a broken arm. She kept seeing it. The planet. The impact. The moment her coordinates failed. She'd checked them. She Hadn't she? Captain Thal limped in, one mandible hanging loose, leaking ichor. Voss, he said, his voice raw. Report. We hit a planet, sir, she stammered, the words tasting like bile. Viridia. Agricultural colony. I don't know how. His eyes narrowed fiercely. You tell me. You set the jump. I did. I checked. Everything was green. I swear, sir, I swear later. We need answers now. Half the ship's gone, crew's dead or dying, and a planet. He trailed off, mandibles twitching. Get to the nav logs. Find out what happened. Yes, sir. She stood, legs, shaky, and saluted. He didn't return it. He turned and hobbled away. In the lower decks, Kaylin spat blood onto the floor, wiping her face with a torn sleeve. Her nose was swollen, probably broken, but she was alive. Tyvan wasn't. She'd found him pinned under a collapsed strut, his chest caved in, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. She'd tried to pull him free, screaming his name until her voice gave out. No pulse, no breath, just another casualty. Fuck you, Ress, she whispered, kicking a piece of debris. Told you not to jinx it. A maintenance tech stumbled past, his arm dangling uselessly. Dravek, you good? Yeah, she lied. You? Been better. Reactors are fucked. We're on aux power till someone sorts it. Great. She grabbed a toolkit from a locker, the routine grounding her. Fix what you can. That's what they taught you. Even if the world ends. On a nearby station, Ambassador Lyra Kex watched the feeds, her four-fingered hands clasped tight. The Trelawney diplomat had been negotiating a ceasefire when the news broke. The Colossus had obliterated Viridia. The Eye. Holo showed the aftermath, a shattered planet, its atmosphere bleeding into space, debris rings forming like a grim halo. Que vadis, humanitas, she murmured in her native tongue. Where are you going, humanity? She'd spent years trying to broker peace, and now this. A war crime, an accident, a catastrophe. Labels didn't matter. The galaxy would demand blood. Her aide, a young Trelawney named Vesh, approached. Ambassador, the council's convening. They want your input. Of course they do, she said dryly. Tell them I'll be there and get me a line to the Colossus. I need to speak to their captain. Yes, ma'am. Vesh hesitated. Do you think... Could it have been intentional? Lyra's eyes darkened. No, but that won't stop anyone from believing it. Now, next amazing story, enjoy. Shit's colder than a witch's tit out there, Nomad. The voice, tinny and filtered through the intercom, belonged to Frost. Captain Evelyn Reed, sitting maybe 50 feet away in her own F-35A, serial number AF215688 staff. Sergeant Mikhail Misha Volkov, callsign Nomad, grunted a non-committal response into his helmet mic. His own bird, AF215675, hummed around him, a low thrum of latent power vibrating through the ejection seat into his spine. Outside the canopy, the pre-dawn Alaskan blackness was absolute, broken only by the dim blue taxiway lights and the distant, orange glow of the main base complex, minus 30 Celsius, probably colder with the wind chill whipping across the flight line. Yeah, witch's tit territory, all right. Just keep your heaters happy, Frost, Misha mumbled, running a gloved hand over the control stick grip. He smelled the filtered oxygen mixing with the faint scent of, well, aircraft, jet fuel residue, electronics, him. It wasn't unpleasant. Just sterile. The tension had been ratcheting up for hours, a low-frequency hum beneath the usual base operations. It started around Oro 1 Guao Zulu with NORAD locking down communications, encrypted channels only. Need-to-know basis, and apparently sitting on the pointy end of the spear didn't automatically put you in the need-to-know bracket. Not initially, anyway. Nomad, Frost, Sentry 1 on tactical, a new voice crackled. This one clearer, less conversational. Sentry 1, the E3 AWACS orbiting somewhere high above the Beaufort Sea. Nomad copies, Misha replied, thumbing the transmit button on the throttle. Frost copies, Reed echoed. Stand by for vector. We're painting multiple Correction. Mass. Contacts, high altitude, descending polar trajectory. Authenticating now. Speed. Excessive. A pause. Static hissed. Nomad, Frost, Cheyenne confirms multiple unknowns. Inbound. Size. Size is unverified. Repeat unverified, but initial telemetry suggests extremely large. Misha felt his gut tighten. Extremely large. That wasn't standard terminology. What the hell was extremely large? An asteroid? A whole squadron of 260s deciding to play stupid games? No, speed excessive. Descending. Polar trajectory. That wasn't Russia. Sentry, Nomad. Authenticated hostiles? Negative hostile declaration, Nomad. Classification. Pending. Standby. Cheyenne's talking to... Moscow just went dark. Repeat, we lost contact with Russian National Defense Management Center. More static. Someone breathing heavily on the other end. Okay. Authenticated IFF challenge. Negative response. From all contacts, repeat negative IFF response. Shit. That was bad. No identification, friend or foe signal. Standard procedure for anything entering restricted airspace. Either their transponders were off, malfunctioning, or they didn't have any. Frost? You getting this? Misha kept his voice level. Professional. Reading. You 5x5, Nomad. Reed's voice was tight now, all trace of earlier banter gone. Size estimate? Sentry. Frost requests clarification on contact size. Misha relayed. Frost? Telemetry is, we're talking, kilometers. One primary contact is Jesus, its continent scale, flanked by hundreds, maybe thousands of smaller returns, variable geometry. Speed still Mach 20 plus, and bleeding altitude. The AWACS controller sounded unnerved now, the professional calm fraying. No known airframe matches this profile. Nothing comes close. We're seeing atmospheric displacement, significant EM interference across multiple spectrums. Continent scale, kilometers, Mach 20 bleeding altitude. Misha's mind raced, trying to process the impossible data. It wasn't Russian. It wasn't Chinese. It wasn't anything human. His training kicked in, overlaying the sheer WTF factor with procedure. Rules of engagement, threat assessment, visual identification protocols. How do you visually identify something measured in kilometers? Nomad. Frost, Sentry 1. The AWACS controller was back, voice strained but regaining control. Scramble, scramble, scramble. Vector 010, Angels 40, intercept course. Rules of engagement are standby. ROE are weapons tight pending. VID or hostile act declaration via command authority. Acknowledge. Nomad acknowledges scramble, scramble, scramble. Vector 010, Angels 40, weapons tight, Misha recited, his hands already moving, flipping switches, engaging systems. The APU's whine changed pitch as the main engine sequence began. Frost. Acknowledges, Reed confirmed, her voice a clipped monotone. The F-35's Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine roared to life behind him, a deep guttural sound that swallowed the APU's whine. Vibration intensified. The cockpit lights flickered as power surged. Outside, ground crew scrambled clear, pulling chocks, giving frantic hand signals under the harsh floodlights that had just snapped on, bathing the alert pad in artificial daylight. Misha glanced at his main display. Engine temps climbing, oil pressure stabilizing, hydraulics nominal, HMDS updated vector line projected onto his visor, pointing north-northeast. Angels 40,000 feet, heading towards... What? He eased the throttle forward. The jet trembled, eager. Through the canopy, he saw Reed's F-35 moving, its navigation lights flashing rhythmically in the oppressive dark. Tower, Nomad flight, 2 F-35s ready for departure, runway 34, Misha broadcasted on the tower frequency. Nomad flight, tower, cleared for immediate takeoff, runway 34, wind 030 at 8 knots. Godspeed. The tower controller's voice was unnervingly calm, but the final word hung in the air. Godspeed. People didn't say that for routine QRA launches, continent scale. The words echoed in his head as he taxied onto the runway, the whine of the engine, spooling up, pressing him back into the seat. Frost lined up beside him. Two sleek, deadly shapes against the Alaskan wilderness, engines screaming defiance at the impossible dawn breaking somewhere beyond the horizon. He took a steadying breath, the oxygen cool in his lungs, flicked his external lights on, checked his weapons load display. 2 AIM-120 AMRAAMs, 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders, internal gun ammo count full, standard intercept loadout, standard procedures for a situation that was anything but standard. Frost. Ready? Ready, Nomad. Misha pushed the throttle to the firewall. Afterburners ignited with a physical punch, slamming him into the seat. The world outside became a streaking blur of runway lights. The F-35 leaped forward, accelerating with brutal force. Continent scale. The nose wheel lifted. Main gear followed, seconds later. Positive rate of climb. Gear up. They climbed into the black, banking northeast, towards the impossible, towards the silent invaders descending from the roof of the world. The intercom was silent now, just the sound of their own, breathing, and the steady roar of the engines propelling them towards the unknown. Below, the lights of Eielson AFB dwindled, a tiny island of order in a world teetering on the edge of chaos. The real show hadn't even started yet. Inside the vibrating cockpit of AF-21-5675, Misha watched the altimeter unwind rapidly on his primary. Flight display, 10,000 feet, 15, 20. The initial G-force of the afterburner takeoff subsided, replaced by the steady push of sustained military power climb. He eased the throttle back slightly, letting the engine breathe but maintaining a steep ascent profile. Nomad flight check. G-suits, he transmitted over their private intra-flight frequency, his voice muffled slightly by the oxygen mask. Standard procedure. Frost checks good. Frost responded immediately from his right wing, her own Lightning II a dark silhouette against the rapidly brightening eastern horizon. Even through the radio, her voice was pure professionalism. Cool, calm, collected. Frosty, indeed. Right now, he was grateful for it. Nomad checks good, Misha confirmed, feeling the suit press reassuringly against his legs and abdomen. He ran a quick diagnostic check on his HMDS, ensuring the projected symbiology floating before his eyes was crisp and accurate. Altitude tape climbing past 25,000. Airspeed indicator settling around 450 knots indicated airspeed. Vertical velocity indicator showing a healthy 5,000 feet per minute climb. Everything nominal. Except, of course, for the reason they were up here. Continent scale. Kilometers wide. Mach 20 plus entry speed. Now bleeding altitude. Nothing human had ever built anything remotely like that. Satellites, sure. Space stations. But something maneuvering, descending, under its own power, on that scale. It defied physics as he understood them. And the smaller contacts? Hundreds? Thousands? Variable geometry? What the hell did that even mean? Sentry 1, Nomad flight passing Angels 30, climbing Angels 40 on vector, Misha reported on the tactical frequency, switching back from their private channel. Roger. Nomad flight. The Sentry controller's voice came back, still strained. Maintain vector 010. Primary contact designated Behemoth, currently estimated bearing 008 range, 480 nautical miles. Altitude fluctuating, descending through 120,000 feet. Associated contacts designated Swarm, maintaining loose formation around Behemoth. Numbers, still refining, but exceeding initial estimates. Significant electromagnetic interference increasing across VHF and UHF bands. Expect comms degradation, 480 miles. At their current closure rate, maybe 30-35 minutes to intercept range. Ish, depending on what the contacts did. Behemoth. Someone at Cheyenne Mountain had a flair for the dramatic or maybe just stark terror. Swarm. Apt, if the numbers were right. Nomad copies. Any updates on Russian or Canadian QRA? Misha asked, probing for more context. If this thing came over the pole, someone else must have seen it, reacted to it. A burst of static answered him before the controller spoke. Possible launch, confirmed, bear interceptions, negative OST contact. The signal dissolved into white noise, then cleared slightly. Nomad, say again. Request status on allied or other nation intercepts, Misha repeated, enunciating clearly. Nomad, Cheyenne reports multiple NORAD assets airborne from Thule and Canadian Forces Base Cold Lake. We had brief contact with Russian air defense elements near Tixi earlier. Contact was lost abruptly. Presumed communications blackout. Or other factors. We have no current signals intelligence from that region. It's dark. Dark. Moscow dark. Tixi dark. That sent a chill down Misha's spine that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature outside the canopy, now probably pushing minus 60 Celsius. His parents had emigrated from Vladivostok in the late 90s. He still had distant cousins there, or had had. The thought felt cold, detached. File it away. Focus on the mission. Copy that, Sentry. Switching radar to long-range search, Misha stated, his fingers dancing across the ICP, the integrated control panel below the main display. He activated the APG-81 ASA radar, setting it to its maximum range setting, sweeping the designated bearing. It was powerful, sophisticated, capable of detecting low observable targets at significant distances. But against EM interference and, potentially, alien technology, all bets were off. The radar display flickered. Symbology appeared. Green icons representing known friendly forces, including Sentry 1 orbiting far behind them and the other NORAD fighters converging from different vectors. Then, clutter, noise, ghost signals flickering in and out of existence near the top edge of the scope, where the contacts should be. The EM interference was already making it difficult to get a clean picture. Frost, you painting anything? Negative, Nomad. Scope's noisy. Lot of garbage returns, Reed replied. Getting intermittent RWR spikes, though. Unrecognized emitters. Wide spectrum, frequency agile. Nothing in the library. Misha checked his own radar warning receiver display. She was right. Strange symbols tagged as unknown, U, flickered intermittently, indicating active emissions from the direction of the contacts. Not tracking radar, not targeting radar, just emissions, like background radiation, but artificial and powerful. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. They leveled off at 40,000 feet, punching through a thin layer of cirrus clouds that glittered with ice crystals in the nascent dawn light. Below, the world was a dark, featureless expanse. Above, the stars were brilliant, hard points of light in the thinning atmosphere. To the east, a faint band of orange and purple heralded the approaching sunrise. It should have been beautiful. Today, it felt ominous. 30 minutes stretched into an eternity, marked only by the steady drone of the engine, the occasional crackle, over the radio, and the relentless countdown of the range clock on his display. Sentry 1 provided sporadic updates, mostly confirming the contact's continued descent and the worsening EM conditions. Nomad. Behemoth trajectory indicates it will achieve atmospheric stabilization around 60,000 feet over northern Canada, near Great Bear Lake region, Sentry updated. Swarm elements appear to be detaching, spreading laterally, some maintaining high altitude cover, others descending with main body. Copy. Any visual confirmations from satellite or high altitude assets? Misha asked. Someone, somewhere, must have eyes on this thing. Standby? Cheyenne confirms. GOES and military sats show massive atmospheric disturbance. Cloud displacement consistent with telemetry. Thermal imaging shows extreme cold shell around Behemoth. Significant energy readings from swarm elements. Visual spectrum imaging, obscured by atmospheric conditions and EM haze generated by the objects themselves. We're effectively blind from orbit right now. Blind from orbit. Shielded by their own energy output or atmospheric disturbance. That wasn't good. It meant VID. Visual identification fell squarely on them and the other interceptors converging on the area. Nomad, Frost. Misha switched back to their private channel. Let's review vid profile. Given the scale, standard head-on or stern pass seems Impractical for Behemoth. Suggest offset approach, maybe 30 nautical miles lateral separation initially. Use the LERX and EOTS for wide-angle observation. Focus on swarm elements first if possible. Smaller, potentially more manageable for initial ID. Agreed, Nomad, Frost replied. Offset approach. Keep sensors slaved to HMDS. Let's try to get some EOTS captures if we get within range. The electro-optical targeting system, a sensor pod, under the nose could provide high-resolution magnified images day or night. Roger. Keep chatter minimal on tactical unless urgent. Let's keep this channel open for coordination. Copy. Range to nearest contacts, likely swarm elements, was now under 200 miles. Misha's radar display was becoming increasingly chaotic, a snowstorm of interference punctuated by fleeting, ghost-like returns. But buried within the noise, definite signals were starting to coalesce. Multiple distinct tracks moving in formation, unnaturally precise formation. Nomad, I'm getting firmer tracks, Frost reported. Bearing 015, range 180, group of 16 contacts, altitude 50,000, descending slowly. Speed 700 knots. Confirm paint, Misha said, manipulating his radar controls, focusing the beam's energy. Got 'em. 16 bogies, conforming to Frost's track. Let's designate this group Swarm Alpha. Sentry 1, Nomad Flight has radar contact, Swarm Alpha element, 16 contacts, bearing 015, range 175, Angels 50, descending, speed 700 knots, Misha reported crisply. Solid copy, Nomad, Sentry acknowledged. Other flights are reporting similar contacts across a wide front. Be advised, Cheyenne reports, significant seismic activity registered from the Behemoth's atmospheric entry corridor. Repeat, seismic activity. Seismic activity? From something flying? The sheer mass required. Misha pushed the thought away. Deal with the immediate threat. Swarm Alpha. Frost, let's adjust vector slightly starboard, 020, maintain offset, Misha instructed. Give them some room. Wilco, Nomad. They banked gently to the right, the massive Arctic landscape unspooling below them, now tinged with the cold gray light of pre-dawn. The eastern horizon was a fiery orange slash, and silhouetted against that rising light, still distant, but becoming perceptible something. Not on radar, not yet clearly defined by EOTS. Just a disturbance, a smudge against the dawn, a vast, dark shape that seemed to absorb the light. Nomad visual? Frost's voice was barely a whisper over the intercom. Misha strained his eyes, focusing past the HMDS symbiology. Tally, maybe 11 o'clock high, looks like distortion? He slewed his EOT sensor towards the bearing. The display flickered, showing a magnified view. Static interference. Then, fleetingly, an image resolved, not distortion. Structure. Immense, black, non-reflective structure. A wall, a cliff face hanging in the sky, blotting out the stars and the sunrise behind it. Its edges were indistinct, fading into the EM haze Sentry had mentioned, but the scale, it was horrifying. It stretched across his field of view, impossibly vast, utterly silent. Behemoth, and detaching from its underside, like spores drifting from some abyssal fungus, were smaller shapes. The swarm. Jesus Christ, Misha breathed into his mask, the profanity escaping involuntarily, his EOTS display focused, fighting through the interference, trying to lock onto the closer Swarm Alpha group. The image stabilized momentarily. They weren't aircraft, not missiles. They were wrong. Sharp angles, surfaces that seemed to shift and flow, no visible means of propulsion, yet moving with controlled aerodynamic grace. Their geometry was variable, just as Sentry had reported, morphing subtly as they flew. Some resembled multifaceted crystals, others elongated shards of obsidian, others nothing he could compare them to. They glowed faintly with an internal cold light. Utterly alien, utterly menacing. Sentry Nomad. Visual contact confirmed. Behemoth. Visual is... Sentry, it fills the sky. Repeat, fills the sky. Swarm Alpha visual confirmed. Contacts are not consistent with any known airframe or missile technology. Geometry is variable, non-aerodynamic shapes moving with controlled flight. Confirming 16 contacts in Swarm Alpha group. Range now 120 miles. His voice was shaking slightly. He clamped down on it. Copy, Nomad. The Sentry controller's voice was grim. Stand by for updated ROE. Command is assessing. Static drowned him out. Frost, you seeing this? Affirmative, Nomad. EOTS has capture. These things... Misha, what are they? For the first time, Frost's professional cool cracked. Just a hair. Before Misha could answer, his RWR screamed. A new tone. High-pitched, insistent. Not a search radar, not a tracking lock. Something else. Simultaneously, multiple Swarm Alpha. Contacts on his radar display flared, accelerating rapidly, turning towards them. Nomad spike, multiple bogies turning hot, braking left. Frost yelled, her F-35 immediately rolling hard, pulling Gs. Nomad braking right, defensive. Misha slammed the stick over, firewalling the throttles, the afterburner kicking in with a roar. The G-suit inflated hard, crushing him into the seat as he wrenched the fighter into a high G-turn, countermeasures, spitting flares, and chaff into the slipstream automatically. The HMDS went crazy, red warning symbols flashing, the RWR shrieking, its unknown alarm. The Swarm Alpha contacts, previously flying in disciplined formation, were now streaking towards them at incredible speed, easily Mach 3, Mach 4, pulling maneuvers that should have torn any human aircraft and pilot apart. Sentry! Nomad flight engaged! Swarm Alpha contacts hostile! Repeat, hostile! Request weapons free! Misha shouted into the tactical net, fighting to keep his eyes on the rapidly closing bogies, now visible as sharp, dark shapes against the brightening sky, even without magnification. Ye mad! Eepens! Repeat! Weapons free! Weapons free! Sentry's garbled voice finally cut through the static, broken but clear on the crucial words. Frost, engage! Fox 3, lead group! Misha commanded, switching his master arm on, selecting an AMRAAM. He designated the lead hostile element rushing towards Frost, his thumb pressing the weapon release button on the control stick. Nomad Fox 3. The missile dropped from the internal bay, ignited its motor, and streaked away, a white smoke trail against the dark sky. Almost simultaneously, he heard Frost call her own shot. Frost Fox 3. 2 missiles heading towards A. Targets moving faster and maneuvering harder than anything they were designed for. Behind them, the silent, continent-sized behemoth hung in the sky, a malevolent witness to the first shots of an impossible war. The swarm was upon them. The 2 AMRAAMs, boost-phase missiles accelerating rapidly, drew clean white contrails against the bruised purple canvas of the high-altitude dawn. On Misha Volkov's helmet display, the diamond symbols representing the AIM-120s tracked relentlessly towards the highlighted icons of the 2 lead Swarm Alpha craft. Time to impact. 8 seconds. 7. 6. He held his breath, pulling 5 Gs in his defensive right turn, eyes flicking between the tactical display, his RWR, and the terrifying visual outside the canopy. The lead alien craft. Those shifting crystalline shards of impossible geometry didn't react. No flares, no chaff, no panicked evasive jinx. They just continued their suicidal closing velocity. 4 seconds. 3. Then, absurdity. The targeted craft didn't dodge. They phased. One moment, solid icons on the scope, lethal shapes against the sky. The next, they seemed to shimmer, their outlines blurred for a microsecond, and the AMRAAMs, sophisticated hunters confused by a target momentarily defying physical laws, shot straight through the space they had occupied. The missiles, robbed of their prey, continued dumbly for a few seconds before self-destructing harmlessly miles away. Nomad! Missiles defeated! No effect! Frost's voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. They just went through them! Before Misha could process the implications, his world exploded in noise and violence. The RWR shrieked a solid, terrifying tone, not a lock, something worse, an imminent impact warning. Simultaneously, the Yasam, lead swarmcraft, having effortlessly evaded the missiles, seemed to unfold. Sections of their crystalline structure peeled back, revealing apertures that glowed with a sickly violet light. "Frost break, incoming!" Misha screamed, wrenching his stick harder, pushing the F-35 to its structural limit, the airframe groaning in protest. 9Gs slammed him into the seat, blurring his vision, forcing a grunt, the practiced strain of the anti-G straining maneuver, barely keeping unconsciousness at bay. He saw violet lances of energy stab out from the swarmcraft. Not beams, not projectiles, but focused distortions, ripples in the fabric of space that screamed towards them. One flashed past his canopy, close enough to make the hairs on his arms stand on end, leaving a trail of disturbed air that buffeted the jet violently. Then he heard it over the intercom, a sound that froze his blood. Not words. A sharp, choked cry of pain from Frost. "Frost! Status!" he yelled, craning his neck against the Gs, trying to locate her F-35 through the chaos. He saw her jet, AF-21-5688, maybe half a mile away. It wasn't flying right. It wobbled drunkenly, trailing black smoke from its starboard wing root. As he watched, horrified, another violet lance connected. It didn't explode on impact like a missile. It hit like a physical blow from an invisible titan. The F-35's right wing buckled, twisted metal shrieking in protest, folding upwards at an impossible angle. The aircraft snapped into a violent, uncontrolled roll. "Evelyn!" Misha roared her name, raw fear overriding protocol. "Hit! I'm hit!" Frost's voice came back, strained, breathless. "Cockpit. Breach. Starboard wing. Controls sluggish. Fuck." There was another grunt of pain. "Arm. Ah. Bleeding." Misha ignored the swarmcraft now maneuvering to bracket him. His sole focus was Frost. He reversed his turn, pulling negative Gs that threatened to pop the blood vessels in his eyes, trying to get back to her. His EOTs zoomed in on her struggling aircraft. The image was horrifyingly clear. The starboard side of her canopy was shattered, crazed like impacted safety glass, spiderwebbing outwards from a central rupture point. Through the breaks, he could see Frost inside, slumped slightly, her head tilted. Her right arm. He could see the dark stain spreading rapidly across the shoulder and upper sleeve of her flight suit. Bright arterial red against the drab sage. Green. Too much blood. The damage to the wing was catastrophic. It wasn't just bent, it looked mauled. Jagged spars poked through torn skin. Hydraulic fluid and fuel vaporized into the slipstream, adding to the black smoke. The jet was fighting her, aerodynamic forces tearing at the ruined wing, trying to rip it off completely. "Frost, can you maintain control?" Misha demanded, his voice tight with controlled panic. He was already selecting his GOU-22A cannon, the master arm hot, trying. Nomad, multiple, cascade failures, flight control, degrading. Her breathing was ragged. Losing altitude. 38, 37,000. Two swarmcraft, ignoring Misha for the moment, peeled off from the main group and dove towards Frost's crippled F-35 like sharks scenting blood in the water. They weren't firing the violet lances now. They were simply closing, their shifting obsidian forms menacing against the fiery dawn sky. "Frost, bandits closing on your 6. Break! Can you break?" "Negative. Can't. Pull. Geez," she gasped. "Arm. Pressure dropping." Rage, cold and pure, flooded Misha's senses. He shoved the throttle forward again, pushing his own undamaged fighter towards the intercept. "I'm coming! Hang on!" He lined up on the trailing swarmcraft harassing Frost. Range, 4,000 feet. The HMDS projected the gun pipper onto the alien vessel. It was like trying to aim at smoke, its form constantly shifting, but he focused on its central mass. "Nomad guns!" he yelled, squeezing the trigger on the control stick. The F-35 shuddered as the 4-barrel Gatling cannon erupted. "Burn!" The distinctive, terrifying roar of the 25mm cannon filled the cockpit, even through his helmet. A stream of PGU-23U training rounds they hadn't loaded high-explosive incendiary for a QRA scramble, damn it, reached out towards the alien craft. He saw sparks, flashes, as the dense tungsten slugs impacted the shifting surface. Not ricochets. The rounds seemed to be absorbed, causing momentary flickers of light on the alien's skin. It staggered in the air, its smooth flight path disrupted, like a bird hit with rock salt. But it didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It turned. Its attention shifted from Frost's crippled jet to Misha. The aperture glowed violet again. Nomad, defensive! Frost's warning was weak but urgent. Misha hauled back on the stick again, jinking hard, flares and chaff blooming behind him like metallic flowers. The violet lance missed him by meters, the air crackling with its passage. He risked a glance back at Frost. Her F-35 was now in a shallow, unstable dive, the damaged wing vibrating horribly. She was losing altitude fast. 35,000 feet. 34? The second swarm craft was pacing her, just off her ruined wing, almost seeming to study her. Frost, talk to me. Altitude? 32,000. Losing hydraulics. Flight controls. Gone sluggish. Nomad. Her voice hitched. My arm. Can't. Tourniquet. He could hear the wetness in her voice now. The sound of someone struggling against shock and blood loss. The shattered canopy meant she was exposed to the thin, freezing air. Hypoxia would be setting in soon, on top of everything else. The swarm craft Misha had fired on recovered instantly, accelerating towards him again with impossible speed. Another violet lance stabbed out. He dodged, the G's crushing him again. His own warning systems blared. Radar lock detected. Not the swarm craft's primary weapon, but something else. A conventional missile lock? From where? He checked his displays, frantically. Sentry 1 was screaming about new contacts appearing suddenly from high altitude directly above the behemoth. Smaller, faster. Vampire! Vampire! Multiple missile launches detected! Unknown type! Chaos erupted. The sky filled with contrails, not just theirs, but dozens more streaking down from above. The Swarm Alpha group scattered, some engaging the new threats, others continuing to press their attack on Nomad and Frost. Misha evaded another attack, his F-35 bucking and shuddering. He needed to help Frost. He needed to survive. He needed to understand what the hell was happening. Frost! Eject! Punch out! He screamed over the cacophony. She was too low, too damaged, losing consciousness. It was her only chance. Can't reach. Handle! Her voice was fading, slurring. So cold. He watched, helpless, teeth gritted, as her F-35, now barely controllable, slipped into a steeper dive. The second swarm craft shadowing her suddenly darted forward. It didn't fire. It slammed into the crippled fighter's tail section. Misha saw the impact clearly through his EOTs. The F-35's vertical stabilizers crumpled like tin foil. The entire tail section sheared off in a shower of sparks and debris. The fighter tumbled, end over end, utterly out of control, plunging towards the barren lands below. Evelyn! No response, just static. He watched the icon representing Frost's aircraft tumble down the altitude tape on his display. 20,000 feet, 15,000, 10,000. Then, abruptly, it winked out. No parachute symbol appeared. No emergency beacon signal registered. Just gone. A primal roar of grief and fury tore from Misha's throat, lost in the noise of the cockpit and the screaming engine. Frost was gone. Mauled, torn apart, plunged into the icy wilderness by creatures that defied understanding. His vision tunneled. The other swarm craft were maneuvering, boxing him in. New missile threats streaked down from above. Sentry 1 was trying to relay targeting data, orders, warnings, but it was just noise. All he saw was red. All he felt was the burning need to kill. He threw his F-35 into a gut-wrenching vertical maneuver, pointing his nose towards the nearest swarm craft, the one that had paced Frost before her end. He ignored the RWR, ignored the missile warnings. Range closed rapidly. 3,000 feet, 2,000... Guns! 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 He snarled, unleashing the cannon again. The alien craft jinked, but not fast enough. The 25mm rounds hammered into its flank, chewing through the shifting surface, causing violent energy discharges. It shuddered, faltered. Misha kept firing, holding the trigger down, flying directly into the stream of his own tracers, consumed by rage. He saw the alien craft start to break apart, shedding incandescent fragments. He flew straight through the debris cloud, metal and unknown materials pinging off his canopy. Then, pain. Blinding, searing pain in his left leg, a piece of the disintegrating. Swarmcraft, a jagged shard of dark, unnaturally dense material, punched through the cockpit floor near the rudder pedals, embedding itself deep in his thigh. He screamed, reflexively jerking the controls. The F-35 snapped violently. Warning lights erupted across his panel. Hydraulic failure. Flight control damage. Engine warning. He looked down. Blood was pooling rapidly around his boot, soaking through his G-suit. A dark, ugly piece of alien shrapnel protruded from his leg, just above the knee. The pain was nauseating, threatening to overwhelm him. Misha gasped, the G-force of his uncontrolled. Snap roll shoving him hard against the restraints, sending bolts of agony lancing up his left leg from the embedded shrapnel. His thigh felt like it was on fire, slick with hot blood pooling inside his G-suit. He gritted his teeth against a wave of nausea, fighting to stay conscious. Nomad... Control... Check, he muttered, his own voice sounding distant, echoing inside his helmet. His hands felt clumsy, unresponsive on the stick and throttle. He tried to input corrections, but the F-35 wallowed, sluggish and half-crippled. The main display flickered erratically, showing a cascade of system failures: HYDP fail AB, FLT Ctrl DEG, ENG VIB HI. He was losing hydraulic pressure fast. The flight controls were going. Through the spinning panorama outside the canopy, sky, ground, he caught glimpses of the battle. Streaks of light, distant explosions, the impossibly fast maneuvering of the swarm craft weaving through descending missile trails from the unknown attackers above. Sentry One's voice crackled, distorted beyond recognition, drowned in static and panicked crosstalk. Multiple vampires, NORAD, command dark, repeat. Then, just harsh, grating white noise. He was alone. Frost gone. Comms gone. His aircraft dying beneath him. He risked looking down at his leg again. The shard protruding from his flight suit was obsidian black, wickedly sharp, maybe 6 inches long. It pulsed with a faint, sickening internal light, like the swarm craft themselves. Alien metal buried in his flesh. Revulsion warred with the blinding pain. He tried to apply pressure with his gloved hand, but the movement sent fresh waves of agony radiating through him, and the blood continued to well up stubbornly. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead under the helmet liner. His breathing was shallow, ragged. Shock was setting in. The F-35 gave a violent shudder, dropping its wounded right wing sharply. Stall horn blared, a repetitive, insistent whoop, whoop, whoop. He fought the controls, trying to level the wings, trying to keep the nose up, but it was like wrestling a dying beast. Altitude unwound relentlessly on the flickering display. 25,000 feet. 20,000... His radar display was a chaotic mess, but one hostile icon detached itself from the furball and grew rapidly larger, vectoring directly towards him. A swarm craft, closing fast. RWR screamed again, that solid, imminent impact tone. He didn't have the altitude to dive, didn't have the control authority to maneuver, didn't have the speed to run. Flares and chaff were useless against their primary weapons, and his guns were likely useless against whatever was coming next. Ejection? Into sub-zero air at this speed, wounded, with hostiles controlling the airspace? It wasn't survival. It was just a different way to die. He slumped back against the headrest, a strange sense of calm descending amidst the pain and panic. He thought of Frost, her choked-off last words. He thought of the impossible behemoth, still hanging silent and vast against the dawn, birthing this destruction. He thought of the alien shard buried in his leg, a grotesque souvenir from the end of the world. The swarm craft filled his canopy, blotting out the sky. Its shifting, multifaceted surface seemed to absorb the light. He saw the violet aperture, open, a malevolent eye preparing to deliver the final blow. Misha closed his eyes. The roar of the wind over the damaged canopy, the shriek of the alarms, the throb of agony in his leg. It all started to fade, replaced by a growing darkness, almayai, heavy pressure behind his eyes. Consciousness slipped away like sand through his fingers. His last sensation was the F-35 beginning its final terminal tumble towards the frozen earth below. Epilogue, 6 weeks after polar fall, classified NORAD Relocation Facility Omega. Eyes only file. Ref, Polar Shield Initial Contact OK, 04115. The flickering cursor blinked patiently on the sterile gray background of the secure terminal. Senior Analyst 3rd Class Davies stared at it. Subject, Reed, Evelyn, Capt, USF. Status, KIA. Last known position, coordinates classified, Beaufort Sea Sector. Aircraft, F-35A, SNAF 215688. Recovered debris, minimal, non-conclusive. Analysis, catastrophic airframe failure following engagement with multiple hostile contacts. Designation, swarm. Presumed cause, enemy action. Audio log, truncated. Final transmission, pained vocalizations, loss of signal. File closed, subject, Volkov, Mikhail, SIT, USF. Status, MIA, presumed KIA. Last known position, coordinates classified, vicinity of Frost KIA marker. Aircraft F-35A SNAF 215675. Recovered debris, none. Analysis, sustained heavy damage during engagement. Pilot confirmed wounded. Audio log reference fragmentary. Indications of loss of control, rapid descent. Final telemetry packet corrupted. No ejection signal detected. Search and rescue attempts, negative. Hostile airspace saturation. Audio. Log, truncated. Final transmission, biosign alarms, static. File pending archival. Davies rubbed his tired eyes. 2 names among thousands. Thousands added every day from every nation still capable of reporting. The initial intercepts, like Nomad, and Frost's desperate scramble from Eielson had been exercises in futility. Highly trained pilots in 5th-generation fighters, thrown against something else entirely. The reports called the primary entity Behemoth. Satellite imagery, when it could pierce the perpetual electromagnetic storms surrounding the continent, sized object now parked in geosynchronous orbit over what used to be northern Canada, showed nothing clearly. Just a vast, light-absorbing presence that chilled the planet beneath it, literally and figuratively. Its swarm escorts continued their relentless campaign, dismantling planetary defense grids, neutralizing strategic assets, and engaging terrestrial forces with terrifying efficiency. Their variable geometry made targeting solutions a nightmare. Their phasing ability rendered most kinetic weapons useless. Their violet energy lances simply erased whatever they hit. Global communications were shattered. Governments operated from bunkers like this one, if they still operated at all. Coastal cities, gripped by initial panic and rising sea levels from Behemoth's gravitational effects, had descended into anarchy or been silenced altogether. Pointless. There was nowhere left to run, nothing left to observe but the inevitable. He closed the file. Another icon glowed on his task list. Another pilot, another loss. The cursor blinked, waiting. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.